おはようございます。今日は漢字を勉強します。We're going to study kanji today. Would like you to follow along and look at your kanji in workbook page 75 through 78. There is another comprehensive explanation of kanji on pages in the very front of the book, which are Roman numerals. So what we have here is an outline of how the book divides the explanation of the kanji. So, of course, the first thing you're going to see on the left-hand column is the kanji itself. And so that is the one that we're focusing on. It's the very first kanji for our lesson 1. This is the meaning of a kanji. So this one right here, this kanji right here means imi, which means meaning. This particular kanji means day or sun. And then something that is always really confusing for a lot of people is that kanji has multiple readings. That's because it was borrowed at different times in Japanese history. And for example, this one is hi, it's read hi, bi, and ka. And then here are some readings that are written in katakana, so you won't be able to actually read that. So it's nichi and ni. So what's the difference? The difference is when Japanese borrowed kanji, it was a Chinese writing system. It didn't really fit Japanese language. So they borrowed a lot of nouns for official documents, things like Buddhist texts, and they used the Chinese reading for it in those particular texts. And that's called the own reading, also known as the Chinese reading. That's why it's written in katakana, because katakana represents foreign loanwords or foreign readings of this kanji. And the first set of kanji written in hiragana is called the kun reading. And the kun reading is the Japanese reading. So this is the reading they assigned to kanji to fit their own language. And over here on the very right-hand side, you have some examples of how that kanji is used in words or phrases. So for example, this is read nichi, yo, bi. So notice that in the same word, you have two different readings of this kanji. You have nichi, and the last one is bi. And in this one up here, it's read sono hi. So what's tricky for most people is figuring out what reading to use at any given time. And that is why we introduce kanji only associated with one particular vocabulary in a given lesson, for the most part. Later on, we might learn another vocabulary that has a different reading of this kanji. So for this particular lesson, oh, sorry, I forget about something. Down here at the bottom, you have the stroke order. Particularly important if you want to look up a kanji in a dictionary online. A lot of times you need to know how many strokes it has. So if you look at this one, it has 1, 2, 3, 4. Not, and probably I should have that at the bottom there, not 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Because as you notice then, this stroke right here is 1 stroke rather than 2. Sorry, I don't mean to keep doing this, but my stylus is a little bit unwieldy. So let's start with the first kanji, which is actually this kanji. So the first one means sun or day. And it is actually a pictograph of a sun with a cloud through the middle. So this started out somewhat like this. Think of it as a sun. Maybe had a cloud going across the middle here, and eventually it was angularized to look like this. Be careful, in font, typewritten font, you get those little things right there, but normally those are very reduced when you write it out handwritten. The next kanji is hon, which means origin or book. So by itself it actually means book. So reading books, hono yomimasu. But in the combination that we're using it for in this chapter, which is down here, it's nihon. So this hon means origin or book. Here we're studying it as origin. And notice that if you're following along in the kana book, you have the stroke order goes 1, 2, 3, 4, and then 5. And this is actually a pictograph of a tree or a plant. So lots of Japanese basic kanji represents plants. And this represents a plant. This is the taproot right here, the main stem. And one way to remember this is that if you take a slice right there, if you just cross it right there, you indicate the main part or the origin of the plant. Alternatively, if you're remembering it as book, you can think of this as a plant or a tree. You take a slice out of a tree, and that's paper. And paper is what we use to make books. Technically, this doesn't mean paper, though it means book. So what does Nihon mean? If we put it all together, it means the origin of the sun. Origin of the sun. Or, as we know, Japan is land of the rising sun. They think the sun originates in Japan. Another kanji compound that we could use this with is Nihon Jin. Now, Jin is not introduced, but it's so easy. All it is it's like a person who's taking a step forward. So there's their head, there's their arms, and this represents their legs. And they're taking a little step forward. So this is Jin. Of course, it has other readings. And the next one is Go, which means language. So kanji is made up of what we call radicals. And radicals essentially are little pieces that mean something and can be kanji by themselves. One of the things that is specific in this kanji, and sometimes radical will tell you a basic meaning or a connected meaning, is that this is supposed to represent a mouth. So by itself, this is the kanji for mouth. It's read kuchi. Now this part right here means 5. This is go in Japanese. That's the kanji for 5. This actually is the whole radical, not just this bottom part here. And this radical means to say. So this kanji is made up of to say, 5, and then mouths. So I think of this side right here as a mouth saying 4 lines, like reading 4 lines out loud or something. That's sort of my strategy for that one. And this is 5. This kind of has a 5 in it. You want to think of it that way. It's a little bit tricky to see that. In any case, what you have then is 5 mouths saying something equals a language. So if we add this together, if we look at our vocab for this chapter, we have the word Nihongo, or Japanese language. So you can use this kanji with anything. Chugoku go, Chinese language. Fransugo, Spaingo, Eigo. This next one is really easy. This is read either dai or o. Dai is the Chinese reading or the own reading. O is the kun or the Japanese reading. And sometimes you can kind of figure out what is the Chinese reading because if you've ever heard Mandarin Chinese or Cantonese, a lot of times these readings of the kanji are similar even now. For example, right now, if you said this kanji in Chinese, it's da shui. In any case, this is a person standing with their arms out and their legs out to be the biggest person they can be. So that's big. So if you see the kanji written like this, it's oki, okay, which means big. So again, you just have to memorize the actual vocab to know that this is read o and not dai. And remember, it is a long vowel, and this one has 2 long vowels, so it's o, ki, e, 2 long vowels. This is gaku. Gaku means to study, or learning. It is made up of a couple different radicals. This is this is actually the kanji for child. So when a kanji is reduced to its smaller state and put together with other kanji, we call it a radical. So that's child, and it's supposed to represent a little kid like this, kind of bundled up, maybe like a baby. You think of a little kid like that. Okay, and it has a hat on. This is also a radical. And that hat has some little strokes at the top. This is actually katakana tsu, which you don't know yet. In any case, it's almost as if you think of, their little brain and they're learning something, so they have these kind of sparks coming out. Now this one is used in a vocab word that we know already, and it's daigaku, daigaku, or think of it as big learning or big study, meaning university. This is sei. Sei means to live or life or be born. And basically this is a pictograph of a plant. It's quite clear. You have, this is how it's written right here. It goes 1, 2, 3, 4, and then 5. Seems counterintuitive sometimes the way kanji is written. But here you have the ground, and then you have the stem of the plant, a couple branches here, and then you have a little leaf right there. Little leaf that was born on the top branch, or is living on the top branch. And we find this in this particular combination right here. This is the word gaku, right, from previous slide. Gakusei, gakusei. So one's life is learning. Someone whose life is learning is a gakusei. So learning for gaku, and sei means life or living. And then if you had dai in front, the big kanji, you get dai gakusei. One's life is large studying, meaning dai gakusei. So our next kanji is sen. Ooh, did I write that right? Yeah, sen. Okay, to be born before or previous. This is also a plant. I know there are a lot of plant illustrations or pictographs in Japanese. And this one is written 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Notice that this one has a hook. It's not, the bottom part, sometimes people get confused. They think they can write it like this. That's not the same thing. It's got to have that little hook there. And this is also a pictograph of a plant where you have the leaf here. It's sort of like sei, that same leaf. And then you have the branch and the stem. And here you have the ground. This represents the ground. And then you have the roots. That's a little odd. Then you have the roots. So this indicates somebody who's lived long enough to actually have roots. They came before you, so they have longer roots than you do. And the kanji that we're looking at today is sen, sei. So recall that sen means to be born before or previous, and sei means to live. So someone who has lived a long time before you, therefore is wiser and smarter, and is perhaps a teacher. And if we add this together with some other kanji that we've seen before, we have ni, hon, go, Japanese, no particle, right? Sensei, a Japanese teacher. Nihongo no sensei. Not sure how I got two sets of kanji there, but anyway. And the last kind of difficult one is nen, which you may recognize. We know a word with nen in it. And this is also read toshi. Now this is the Chinese version. This is the Japanese version. So this is the onyomi, the Chinese reading. This is the kunyomi. The thing with Japanese is it is almost always, not 100%, but almost always the on reading, the Chinese reading, when it is together in compounds. So if there are 2 or more kanji make up a word, it is almost always read with the own reading. If it's by itself, it's almost always read with the kun or the Japanese reading. This is not a 100% rule. Now notice here too that you can tell the difference between the Japanese and the Chinese reading, because the Japanese reading has 2 syllables, toshi. And almost all Chinese readings are 1 syllable. So this is a pictograph of another plant. I'm sure you're getting sick of the plant pictographs. But anyway, think of this as, this is your plant, this is your stem. You can think of it as the ground if you want, or you can think of the ground as down here somewhere, but it doesn't have a stroke there. In any case, you have 1 leaf here and you have 1 leaf here. And every year that plant, oh, it's not a leaf, it's a blossom. Okay, so here it's a blossom. 1 on the top left and 1 between the middle and the bottom. So every year that plant sprouts 2 blossoms. Maybe it's like a cactus. And, oops, actually we haven't introduced one of these kanji here. This is actually nan here. And you have nen, sei. Literally, what year student? Okay, sorry though, nan is introduced in the next slide. And then you have nan nen. How many years? So actually I realized that I forgot a kanji, and that's funny because I did it last night. But anyway, if you notice on your page, it is page 77. We're missing this kanji, and I'm just going to introduce it right here. It is nan or nani. You saw it on the previous page. And this kanji is a little tricky. A lot of people write this kanji like this by accident. They write that as 1 stroke. It is not 1 stroke. It's actually 2 strokes. I've kind of exaggerated how far this goes out, but there is a crossover here. Okay, so what I think of this one is, what's in the box? What's in the box? As in, there's something here, and then there's some wrapping around it, and you want to know what's in there. So this could be the box right here, or you can think of it, this is that box, and this outer part is wrapping. And so this is nani go would mean what language, and then of course you have nan nen sei, what year are you? So those are so far, those are 2 kanji compounds that we know of. This one is ichi. It's the easiest kanji in the Japanese language. It's read ichi or shito, and it has 1 stroke. It just means 1. And it is in compounds like ichi, nen, ichinensei. Ichinensei, and ichinen means 1 year. 2 is easy. Of course, it has 2 strokes. And it is read ni or futa. And it is in compounds like ninensei and ninen, meaning 2 years. 3 strokes. So this doesn't, unfortunately, continue on forever. We'd have, 8, something like this, Doesn't continue on like this. Past 3, you don't have the same horizontal strokes representing numbers. We have down here the combination of kanji that we're looking for, which is sanensei and sanen. So the last kanji is 4, and you can see, for example, that this looks quite a bit different than the one in your book. It's written ichi, ni, san, shi, go. So notice, just like nan, this is 1 stroke rather than 2. Okay, and I'll notice right away if it's written slightly off. So this has 4 corners. So think of 4 corners. With the legs, this looks like legs hanging down here, but almost 2 of those corners are sort of emphasized. Or you could think of it as a stage. where these are the curtains that kind of come down like that. In any case, this is read yon, yo. Of course, there's the variation of shi, so sometimes people say ichi ni san shi, sometimes they say ichi ni san yon, and yo. This is a small tube. And so this is found in combination like yonensei and yonen. So notice here that the kanji is read yo rather than yon. So one thing I want to point out too in this last slide is that kanji are meaning-based. They have some sort of meaning with them. They're not just, for example, you would not write this kanji to represent the sound ni. You use it for its meaning. So for instance, if we were using the word oni-san, which means somebody's older brother, sorry, that's connected, but that's an E, you would not substitute this kanji for this sound because the word you're using must have the meaning of day or sun in it. So you can't just substitute kanji for sounds because kanji is meaning-based. In any case, I've seen students do that every once in a while and just wanted to let you know that that is not something you can do. So you memorize the kanji based on the vocab that we study in the lesson. All right, that's it.